In this episode of Health and Safety Unplugged, I am joined by Daniel Hummerdal and Rob Cousins of Open Change, who are whipping up a storm across the country, running workshops and empowering health and safety practitioners to take the axe to the health and safety paperwork. During this discussion, you will discover all about the Trojan mouse. As always, be sure to share and like this episode and subscribe to Health and Safety Unplugged on both YouTube and Spotify. Look, thank you both for making yourself available to talk with us today. So we are going to be making this available to the Health and Safety Unplugged community, many of whom are from the New Zealand Health and Safety Professionals network as well, and many I know will be very excited to hear from you both today. So let's just kick off and go straight into some of those questions. So Rob and Daniel, you're both from extensive experiences in applying additive thinking in different fields. Rob, for example, you have experience in Arctic expeditions, which is amazing, and organizational change. Daniel, you have an aviation safety background and also workforce improvement. And so how do you both believe innovative thinking in one field can inspire and inform practices in another field, particularly when it comes to health and safety?
Yeah, if I just kick it off by saying that I find probably most of my inspiration for new practices in non-safety literature. If I read what's going on in more education or in social work or work in family therapy, there's so much exciting progress happening in developing new methods, for example, to assess a family dynamic. And that can quite easily be translated or transposed or adopted into a safety setting, which is how do you assess a group dynamic? Well, some of those tools that therapists use to sort of get a read of where families and how they relate to that can be quite valuable. How do you allow a good dialogue happening between multiple parties that social workers might be quite skilled in? It's very easy to translate or transpose into this part of the professional life.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then Rob, how about yourself? So from your background, your experiences, how do you find those multi disciplines, I suppose, mutually supporting one another?
I guess most disruptions happen from outside of the sector, don't they? It's like Spotify disrupted the music distribution thing. That was an IT company. So other sectors have always got really relevant thinking. It's just you haven't discovered it yet, or you haven't realised the power of it. I think health and safety is all about people, really. So anything to do with people is going to be relevant to health and safety. And stuff to do with people is it's in the way that we might think about resilience or resilience engineering, just as much as it's in the world of organizational development, or Daniel was talking about psychology. People, the product of our psychological process, anything that's relevant to that will help us do anything with people. And I believe health and safety is all about people. So it's just implicitly relevant.
That makes thank you. That makes a lot of sense in terms of how I guess it's not all about health and safety, right? It's an all-encompassing thing where health and safety just happens to be part of the same equation that we're all focusing on, I suppose. Also, based on your answers, it's no surprise, and it should be no surprise to our listeners, that both of you have psychology in your background. So both of you studied at high-level psychology. Rob, you had a bachelor's degree in psychology, and Daniel, you have a master's degree in psychology. Is that right? Yeah, fantastic. And so with both of you having that foundation in psychology, how do you think that psychology and psychological principles can be employed to cultivate a safety culture within an organization? And what similarities do you see across different organizations and different industries?
I mean, I think for me, my training and background in psychology has really helped me to, I guess, appreciate some of the, more of the complexity behind human behavior. That you really need to step into the subjective world of whoever's making decisions and taking actions to try to understand what is important to them, what are they trying to achieve, what are they trying to avoid. And having some of the tools about it, being curious and asking questions, and people's open up and all that has been really helpful for me in my career in health and safety. So I think that is sort of the really powerful thing that it's, is so on and so on. And I'll get back to your second part of the question in a moment. But I also want to say that psychology can work the other way as well, that I see that some people provide, if you look at creating profiles around people's risk appetite, for example, or they say that we have this sort of neuropsychological disposition towards certain behaviors, whatever. It just becomes another way of saying, hey, you're a human, you're problematic, and we need to control you, or we need to box you in here. So while psychology can be beautiful to sort of embrace more complexity, it can also be used to just box it up and make it very simplified and judgmental. So just be mindful that psychology per se is not going to solve everything. It depends on how you use it and what you use it for, which is, I think, worthwhile. The connection that you make around how can psychology help building safety culture. So for me, what I find be quite enamored with sort of humanistic thinking and humanistic psychology, Abraham Maslow and those stars in that field. They really emphasize that we need to trust people. We need to create a sort of space for autonomy, that the human spirit thrives under certain conditions. So if you really want to have a thriving safety culture, you need to create space for people to author it, to shape it, to contribute to it in ways that they see fit. Safety culture is not about just implementing standards and values and impose it on people. You can try that, but you are actually going to constrain the human spirit, which is what you want to flourish and really come alive for the safety culture. So coach that you really need to start with. What is it that people want to contribute to it?
Yeah, fantastic. I love what you just said there. So it's going back to the intended audience. It's asking the question, actually, what is it you guys want, rather than assuming to know what the solution is and running off and creating a policy or process to solve that, right?
Yeah, I am yet to meet the first person who was in a workplace accident. There's some extreme cases where it's, there's undepressed pilots taken down, but in the main, that doesn't happen. So the question is rather, how can I harness that motivation that is already there? I have never felt the need to try to motivate someone to be safe. To get them to comply and, work with the specific, it might be a different thing, but people are already motivated to do a good job. They really most people want to do that, but sometimes that motivation gets undercut by complexity and messiness and scarcity and goal conflicts and this whole range of things. But historically, the fact that people want to be safe, they want to return home at the end of the day and use that motivation as well.
Amazing. So you've both had quite amazing careers, actually. I took some time just to have a look to look at your resumes on LinkedIn and to see how you've pieced together your clearly your interest and passion about people behavior and what makes us tick and how to make the world a better place in a smarter way. And in more recent times, you have developed and created Open Change. Rob, perhaps I'll allow you to introduce Open Change and to tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, Open Change is really a business. It's about helping people get their start on people. How do you connect with people's creativity and ideas to overcome whatever problem or set of issues that you might have in your workplace or in your organization? Because you can't just sort of throw open the doors and say, people are the answer, let's go ask them. You have to ask them the right questions. You have to give them the right resources, the right tools to be able to do that, permissions to be able to do that. Create the right feedback funnel so that whatever is said is then acted out. But the belief in it, as Daniel was talking about with the sort of psychological side, is that when you give people autonomy over the things that affect them, you actually create enduring and sustainable solutions. But you also start to access more of the resources that are in your organization. Do you want to have 2 or 3 brains trying to solve a problem in the center? Or do you want to have all of the brains that are involved in the issues sort of contributing what they know to be able to co-create a better solution and keep adapting and changing them according to whatever the context or situation is? So open change is really organizing ourselves around helping people to do that, to run processes, design processes, and just sort of conceive of sort of issues in that way, and so that people can be the sort of architects of more and more often.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And so, in layman terms, I suppose, what would be the standard process if an organization reached out to you to say, hey, look, we've identified a problem, we just don't know how to get over that hurdle. How would you start that process?
I think first off, you need to understand what kind of problem you're being presented with. Is this a need to improve something, or is this we want to innovate and you're not doing? Is this about the approach that you want to take to connect with people? What kind of questions might you be wanting to put to people? Do you want to do something completely open source? Or do you still have constraints that you have to work within that you need to share these with people? People know the constraints, they'll work within them. But you have to be open. I think that becomes the sort of first one, is what's the potential that you're trying to create? And then
in terms of the reactions to some of your clients, I imagine even that's probably a bit of an eye-opener for some, in terms of they think that they've determined the problem, and then you've arrived to go, well, actually, what is the issue? And they may perhaps say, well, we think it's this. But actually, once you start to uncover and look under the hood and ask some more probing questions, are there ever times where it's a bit of a, oh, actually, this is more or something entirely different to what we had first supposed?
I mean, there's always that journey, isn't there, when you're doing this kind of work? Because the thing's often not the thing that they really need support about.
Yes.
And there's this little sort of discovery period, I suppose, isn't there, where you try to work out what's really going on here, or what's the appetite for doing things in this organization. And that might not just be from the client, the person who's commissioning that work. It might actually just be within the organization. Where's the level of trust here? Because that sets what's achievable in the first.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I love it. And then Daniel, so one of the focuses for your organization is participatory management practices. So how have these practices transformed the decision-making processes in organizations that you've worked with? Can you perhaps give us some examples?
This participatory management practice is really about not only consulting people, but actually giving people a chance to have a greater say in the decisions that are made. And there's so many different ways. Some of the ways we've gone about this is to use what we call crime sourcing, which is really just go out and put a question or a challenge to an entire organization. How can we become an organization that is better at X? Or what are your ideas how we can address this problem? And then you just let people come out of the woodworks and start telling about what they're passionate about, what they've been thinking about. And you'll be surprised about the amount of creativity that's just residing there. But organizations normally don't invite that in, because you've got experts, you have consultants that are figuring it out for you, and then becomes about this sort of one-to-many implementation. But what happens when people start sharing their ideas is that they discover like-minded people across the organization, start building community. Maybe you can work together on this thing, which is really quite an exciting way of bringing about change. So just open up, putting lots of minds to work on Something we developed around more appropriate around risk assessment was to just ask people what do you know about the things that we have in place to stop you from dying or getting seriously hurt, and just get people to collectively list those controls and then give some feedback on how effective those controls are, as a just using the collective intelligence that you have at your fingertip. Every employee is a possible sensor for what is going on and what could be going on. So set up your toolbox talks in that kind of way. Don't make it a moment to tell people what's important. Make it a moment for people to tell you what is going on, what is holding them back, what are their concerns. And when you start reshaping your practices, that the flow of information, the direction of communication is changing, and you start having a dialogue about things, which to some degree is messier than just have a command and control type situation, but it also allows organization and your interventions, your decisions.
I really like that. It's kind of finding the harmony in the mess.
Yeah. I think the art to it is the good question, or a good set of questions. So then you have to work quite hard at those, because if you ask a good question, people bring their own content, and then you're working with what they believe and building understanding around their own context. An example that you can organizing some help for one organization around what we go away from defining what resilience is. Instead, you just sort of ask lots of questions that build people's understanding of, I actually get you, and you sort of build that understanding in people, and it sort of creates that sort of intrinsic understanding people can carry with them. It's much better than that sort of persuasion argument, or let's just line up information here for you to learn and then be able to quote. But it sort of lead understanding something and being able to apply. So the art is the question, and then how you sort of create that discussion that challenges people, moves people along.
And I imagine with a lot of the work that you do, there must be times where individuals or groups within an organization may feel quite challenged by this approach, because what you're doing is you're asking them to almost put their ego to the side for a second. Their persona up until now may be that they are the health and safety champion. They're the ones that are leading the charge and potentially populating the hazard and risk register and coming up with the controls, and then going to the group to deliver to them what the controls ought to be. How do you, well, one, is that what you see when you engage with organizations? And if so, how do you help to disengage that potential conflict?
There's a number of memories that come to mind when for example, when we did the crowdsourcing stuff. It's often the comms team that has really concerns about that, because what we're doing is we're opening up the brand. So they get a little bit, well, what stories are going to come out of this, and what if people get civil and whatnot. So all these, anxieties and concern that people might have about what's happening now, how's this been play out, and none of those things have sort of played out in that kind of way. And once you start doing it, so to some degree, the answer is, well, let's give it a try, shall we? Right? I hear what you're saying. I think you're wrong, but the evidence, the proof will be in the famous pudding. But I think those concerns need to be taken seriously, right? So if you're moving too fast, if you're creating too much anxiety, you run the risk of being shut down eventually, that your project will not be tested. So it's a question of, well, okay, I always say, how can you right-size this trial? How can we make it smaller? How can we test the waters as we step into this together? Or you start thinking about, okay, how can you retain control? This is not about giving up control. This is about sharing it out. But, for example, one solution around talking about safety management system might be that, well, let's make the safety management system much more collaborative, that people can comment on, that can put suggestions in. If you run it on a Google Sheet or collaborative doc, well, those are just suggestions. You still have the control what to do with those. Crowdsourcing, those are just suggestions. This decision-making process that still leaves you in control. We're just sharing the creative part of this process, the assessment part. So what I'm trying to explain here is that you need to sort of modulate the anxiety a little bit or make it fit. What is that thing? And I make sure that people still have some control in use, because that's mostly they're gonna lose control or lose status. Ego. So
Yes.
there are ways around it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess it all comes back to building trust whilst maintaining that momentum as well, based on whatever pace it is that they're looking for and what they're comfortable with. It's really interesting stuff. I really like how you're defining your approach. It's clearly not a off-the-shelf, tick the box and away you go. There's some real thought in what you're doing, and even the words and the language in which you're using, it just resonates with the whole, we're bringing you on the journey. And by the way, you're defining the journey. We're just here to help facilitate and make this happen. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, it's nice to hear that it comes through that kind of, we're so as far away as a off the shelf. We have a process that we follow, but it always needs to be adapted to the people involved, the culture, the values, that situation we're in. So I'm a firm believer that the local people know best what is needed, rather than looking to do a copy paste of what they're doing in aviation or an old platform in the North Sea, which is common standards that people believe that we follow best practice, then we will be safe. And sure, there's things that can be learned through that, but you run a huge risk. I would argue that it's actually that the risk on buying something off the shelf is much bigger than trying something new using small scale methodology.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm really pleased you said that as well. It's quite refreshing. Particularly, I've been consulting on and off for the last 11, 12 years now, and the off-the-shelf solutions are still very much in the market and still, by all accounts, selling very well. But the reality is that they're not really making any impact, and as you say, probably actually potentially doing more harm. Rob, how about yourself? Have you had anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think the off-the-shelf thing is when you step back into the world of the psychologist, isn't it? You're just telling people what to do again, and that's what people don't like. You're taking and any system that you might have that's written down, or any policy that you have, people need to engage with it. You come across a lot of times people talk about, I can't get my workers to wear their PPE. What do I do? I can't force them and be there putting it on for them, and we get back into the world of the psychologist. What's the incentives and drivers of some? There's one organisation used to just talk to their workers about, well, if you don't put this on, we won't win the contract because we won't have our health and safety compliant, and then we won't have a working man at the job. And it was like the simplest thing. Whereas you end up in these stooges sometimes, don't you? Put it on. Another organisation was start to give people choice about the way that they manage particular risks. And they found engagement went up because you actually had more choice. They could think about things more. They understood.
In terms of some of the footage that's been shared on the NZHSP Facebook group recently, it's old stock footage of men back in probably in the 1950s, black and white footage of them running up and down ladders, doing maintenance on the chimney stacks back in the UK. And it's just like, from our perspective, absolutely horrifying. But weirdly, the reality was these guys were doing this day in, day out. I don't know what the statistics were, and not even sure if those stats were being saved and stored at that point in time. But it does make you wonder sometimes whether our approach over the last few decades has actually undone some of that risk awareness and self responsibility in the workplace? Kind of going off tangent a wee bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, actually. Yeah.
Oh, look, Matt, I think you're absolutely right. I think, so I've been in New Zealand now for almost 6 years, and before that I was in Australia 8 years. And one of the most common questions I get asked here is, like 10, 15 years behind. And blah, blah. But honestly, I said, look, I worked in safety critical industries over there, electricity, aviation, bad things could happen. And they invested heavily in control, constrain people, make sure that everyone signed on a 27-page JCA before, going onto site, and, this legalistic administrative approach to things. And it does not help people to build this sort of risk awareness or being skilled in using their, or their other senses than just, reading and signing. So it's really developing human wisdom, taking responsibilities in way you see fit, and making contributions that are surprising. It's almost impossible because everything has been prescribed. It is an approach that leads to a dead end when it comes to the first period. And it's really tricky to back out of it. So I have sort of caution against following Australia, because they are struggling to sort of get work 6 years ago when I left. But it is hugely problematic. I think health and safety professionals are really passionate about people, but be really, established by the practices that are quite human hostile in the end. So there's a paradox in here. We care about people, so we're going to tell a bit of a shorthand here, but it is problematic, a lot of it. So it's, that's what we're quite passionate about, both Rob and I, about how do we recraft them, as we talk about.
Thank you.
More people.
Yeah, that was really, I really enjoyed you saying that. Thank you. Please continue. That was excellent.
We've put a sort of conundrum and a continuum to a few boards, where, at one end of the things, you've got, our health and safety system is about absolving our liabilities, which, everyone's saying, oh gosh, we manage those life. But on the other end of it, you've got, our health and safety and systems and policies are about, and we challenge it. Well, where are you? And put themselves on all slightly different places and so on. We start to talk to them about, how come you put yourself there? What is present that makes you there, not further up? And it becomes kind of sort of challenging conversation for them, because when you really start to unpick the things that make them think it's people centered, we've got policies to keep people safe. Okay, you've got the policy. What will the policy do? Well, it sets out minimum standards. Okay, so this is a compliance issue. So it sort of moves you back this way. And it becomes quite a challenging conversation for them about how, the system that they have is often much more compliance driven than it is around working with, for, and without people. Which is a very challenging thing for leadership. I mean, you get sort of torn then about, wow, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Well, we'll set up about protecting people. So
yeah, it's always a really interesting experience looking at that health and safety maturity scale, and watching as the realization dawns on people that actually they are much further down that scale than first thought. Daniel, you mentioned earlier that Open Change, you guys do have some systems and processes that you bring to the table. One of them I noticed on your website was called the Mission Innovation Hosting, which kind of sparked my interest. I was like, oh, I'd like to know more about that. So what is that, and how does that fit into everything that we've perhaps discussed recently?
Okay. We'll start with, mission innovation is a concept. It's being deployed by fairly large scale economies. When we work at the sort of national level of things, or even the international, the concept comes from something of achieving a mission. So this goes back to President Kennedy announcing in the early 60s that before the end of the decade, they could put a man walking on the moon. That was his mission, which was clear, ambitious, and tangible, and it was time-bound. There was a real mission around it, and there was a real heat to it. And then he tilted the entire economic playing field to make it easier for a lot of organizations, both private and government, and research to work together to achieve this mission. Rob and I have done this in the past, where we get groups of people together to talk about what is your mission, what ambitious goal do you want to set for your organization, and how can we work together to make that happen. So depending a little bit on the scale and the amount of lever, achieve different things in that. But we're trying to do that around safety as well, to say, okay, we know quite well what is not working in our approach to health and safety today. It's way too reactive, it's disempowering to people, it's way too legalistic, or it's about external things rather than learning. And so okay, we know that. So let's talk about what is it that we do want to create in health and safety. What is that alluring, attractive future, that legacy we would like to leave behind? And get lots of people to talk about that together, and then start learning collaboratively. So, you might run an experiment about having health and safety committees in a different way. Someone else might try something. Well, someone else might try a different approach to health and safety committees. If we can get multiple pros or trials happening in parallel, we can speed up the learning. So we do it and make sure that we move faster towards that ambition that we set out. And then you can do that for whatever practice area that you have underneath that goal. If it's just about health and safety committee, so be it, that you can do for all of these things that we're talking about. So we want to sort of connect people up to be ambitious about the opportunities, the degrees of freedom we have available to us.
Yeah, brilliant. I've got a background many years ago now, but I did philosophy and politics, and so I guess one of the reasons why I went down that track was to better understand the world around me. I felt that I hadn't been equipped to understand what was being said in the news, and to understand why I felt the world was unfair. So I went to university to try and figure that out. Still trying to figure it out now. But it's, I guess, that boiled down, what I'm trying to say is that there's always been a sense of trying to understand in order to make improvements. That's always just been something that I've always felt is what I wanted to do. But actually, when you present that opportunity to others, often that's where you find people start to open up, and that's where you start to find the solutions. And it seems to me that's very much the ethos of what you're both achieving in workplaces across the country, which is just amazing. It's really fascinating stuff. And obviously you have successfully produced 2 workshop events in New Zealand. You're just on the cusp of doing your 3rd one, which is taking place here in Christchurch tomorrow. And so I suspect a lot of what we've discussed so far, we'll see that in practice. Is that what many of the participants can expect?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of these events is really to connect people together to help each other solve the problems that we have in front of us. Found over the years of working in health and safety in New Zealand that so many people are just on their own, isolated. They're a bit lonely, or they, don't have that many connections with other people that they can actually leverage from or draw from as frequently as they need. But similarly, the problems are also similar. I want to try something different. How do I convince my organization or my leaders that I actually need to take a different attitude around this? How do I get buy-in to try something different or do something new? How do I engage my workers successfully over something that they'll disengage and find boring or is undermined by someone else? I've heard about this learning teams of whole or something like that? What are other people's experiences about that? What adaptations can we take? It doesn't matter what business you're in or what part of the country. The question is by pulling together people from different sectors, and I think this is sort of the sort of open change way of things. We just ask you guys questions about where you want to head or where you want the future to be, and just create a sense of that, that it usually comes back as a sharing of knowledge, trying new things, learning. You start to understand the strengths that we have between us. It's very easy to see all of the difficulties. There's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about health and safety legislation not being fit for purpose. Businesses don't understand it. There's a lot of difficulties, but when you step back and you look at what we have, and one of the groups looked at the strengths we have between us. We've got a range of technical disciplines that we can draw from that complement each other really, really well. We've got businesses that actually do want to try new things. They just want to have the right process and trust in that. We want to learn from each other. We had a workforce, particularly younger workers, that expect more and want something different. And when you put that forward, well, why can't we start making? And then, the rest of the event is really focused on, well, what you want to change in your organization. Let's not worry so much about having the right policy settings in government or the right regulation structure. We wait ages for that, and we're never quite or as effective as what we want it to be. Why don't we start creating this change now? Because there's not really anything in our way. How can we help and support each other to create a change that you want to make with you? And then Daniel was alluding earlier, sort of crowdsource the skills and experience that you might need to be able to structure something. So what we bring to that is questions, the right framing, and then a few tools that you can use to have enough structure.
Yeah, it's really coming through loud and clear, the importance of asking good quality questions, right? It seems to be one of the very key things that sounds like you'll be bringing to the table. And also in terms of inclusiveness, ensuring that all the participants feel that they're being heard and that their opinions are valid. Is that a fair comment?
Create a greater space for the diversity we have when we start a session. Regardless if you run a workshop or risk assessment, because you have viewpoints of individual experiences, and that needs to be heard. Then your job is to have a process or something to start connecting those up and make a more sort of holistic understanding about what does this mean? What does it mean for where we're coming from and where we want to go? And so we definitely try to do that on a day of say, hey, we're all holding different parts of the jigsaw puzzle, both understanding, what is currently going on, but also the future. So there's a lot of that going on. But I really want to reinforce this point that Rob mentioned in passing there, which is that while these health and safety people are often very lonely, disconnected, and frustrated, they also, because they have a vision, they have a dream, they want their organizations to be different or to try something, or that frustration comes from a good place. So our job is to toolify that, to give some concepts and some tools so they can go home and try it. So we're going to teach people to design micro experiments, for example, which is, how do you take something that is already in place, but you infuse it with one of your beliefs that it will be better if it's done more collaboratively, if it's done with greater autonomy, whatever it is. And then you run a little trial on that. So that becomes your Trojan mouse to introduce a bit of new DNA into your organization, create some evidence, it creates a bit of a the smallest possible snowball you want to sort of roll down a hill, and it sort of feeds off itself once you start seeing, hey, I can try this, I can try something else. So I just feel like we want to give some stepping stones for people to start being more active change agents, and that's really what we want this to be about. And if they can do that in collaboration with others, fantastic.
So you're building confidence in individuals and as a collective. You are encouraging people to take micro steps, challenging but achievable. And then I guess you're also providing a feedback loop for them as well. So once they've been and gone through and experienced a workshop like what you're describing and what you've been successfully presenting, and then providing them with a platform to then share those experiences, which just sounds amazing. So perhaps could you let us know a little bit more about the post-event experience that many have gone through?
Yeah. So we have a platform where participants get access to. It's completely up to them if they want to use it or not. But it's a decentralized thing. It looks a little bit like social media in the sense there's a feed, but then you can create your own community. You say, I want to have one example that is on there. Someone said, I want to have a community around AI and safety because this guy who created it, he is tasked with sorting something out for this organization around AI. And now, 8 people have joined that community. So there's the beginning of a conversation around AI and safety. And anyone can create the community, but you can also set up an event saying, hey, I want to co-design a micro experiment around something, right? So you just say, hey, here's my suggested time, here's a link. So you just get access to all the people that have been through these events. But instead of going through Rob and I or sending out a big email, it just becomes one hub really where this information is easily findable. You just, as a search field, you just put, looking for someone with AI competence, and you get, here's a community, here's a person who said my skills are this space. So there's a way of organizing, this. So how can I ask for help, and how can I give help? It's very creating a gift community of people who want to create change and help.
Brilliant.
It's one of the things that I always really enjoyed in health and safety is people just really happy to share, really happy to share their stuff, and you do what you want with it, you adapt it how you need to. But this sort of platform gives you a chance to put a shout out to, hey, does anyone know anything about this? We had one guy on there that said he's saving hours of work and just being able to sort of connect with someone that could give them the download on several different apps or something, and then there's not necessarily hours ferreting around for all the information, but it's all the ability to just keep and simply connect with people is the aim.
Yeah, brilliant. Once again, it's just kind of breaking down those silos, whether they're real or imagined, in terms of the isolated health and safety manager, or the department versus department within the company, or company versus company. What you're doing is just creating that level playing field, creating safe spaces by all accounts of just enabling people to actually be honest with each other, which is fantastic. So in terms of inspiring leaders and guiding them through the change process, what are some of the core principles of your generative leadership coaching, and how do these principles support leaders in navigating change effectively?
I can start, Rob, you jump in. So the starting point is that you have some sort of challenge, and you probably know, a little bit what the problem is, what you want to get away from. But as you sort of alluded to, and I didn't say then, but I think it's one of the changes is sort of reframing that problem to a more possibility-centric purpose thing. And that's where I feel that leaders have a really important role to say, okay, we know this is not working. I want to hear from you what could potentially work. I want to create a collective image of the future that we can walk towards. And a leader being keen to listen for dreams people have, I think, is a very compassionate leader, but also someone who's actively curious about, what's possible here, and really open up for possibilities. So that is going to also help with the creativity that is required to sort of move towards the future with greater openness, I think. But then it's a question of asking people to contribute towards that, about running trials or running experiments to see, how could we potentially deliver on that and allow for they're a band of passionate people. Some of the misfits, the cynics of the organization, they're also very passionate about things. They want to create, they want to show the world that their ideas are better. So, use them and engage small people to do this sort of zigzagging, or like a whimsical heat-seeking rocket is looking for this target over there. And the role of the leader is there to sort of hold that together. So let how it goes and work towards that. And then once you either hit or miss something, if you learn a positive with a negative in terms of, well, that didn't work out, well, as well, make sure that other people know about these things, that it becomes a learning culture in the organization that we move forward. So you have a brief process in there about opening up the opportunities, allowing self-organizing trials, make sure that your organization learns from all that. That is what a generative leader would make sure that is.
Sounds very much like a win-win situation. So you win if you succeed in what the mission was, or you learn from the mistakes and are one step closer to getting to the moon, right? How about yourself, Rob?
Well, I mean, change happens at the speed of trust, doesn't it? Like you could create a set of metrics that hide that, I suppose, but it doesn't mean that change is occurring. It would be very short-term and unsustainable, and maybe fall apart. Change happens at the speed of trust. You really have to focus on building trust between people and things. Like, it's not just sort of trusting between different people in the organization. It's trusting in the direction that we're choosing to head in, or the things that we're doing, the way that we're doing them. And when you sort of challenge people or organizations about it, to what extent do people trust in this? But someone might have a view, but if you ask them, and you start to build a different picture of where the relationship. I often think a neat way of sort of cutting through it is to sort of sink into the sort of human experience. Like particularly, the goal conflicts that exist are often the things that sort of hold all organizations back. Construction sites, do I get the job done on time, or do I go and get proper tools and equipment to go do it? There's probably not always a correct answer to go one way, and someone has to make that decision. The more you can make those relevant for the leaders, you start to help them to understand what decisions are really being made in the organisation by the people, and by sort of humanising those moments, I think it often starts to sort of pull the people in the organisation together, so they actually get a bit more mutual trust. And from workers' side of things, I've often found that when leaders share the constraints that their decisions are made under, you get a lot more empathy. And so I didn't realise that, you can't do these things for contractual reasons, you can't do those things for budgeting reasons, so we're left with this as a scope. Like those constraints, you often end up with a lot of understanding from workers once those and it's quite freeing for leaders to suddenly not feel like they're carrying the weight of all of that themselves. So I think those become sort of guiding principles for me in the way that it's set up, sort of leadership.
Brilliant. Love it. I love the mission that you're both on. I think it's invaluable. Timing wise, couldn't be any better. I feel, as you've alluded to, like we're in this weird period at the moment where health and safety is yet again under the microscope, and it looks like the rules and the playbook are going to change, and the pieces on the chessboard are going to be moved around, and it's like, well, actually, are we any further along the path to getting where we all want to really be? I'm not sure if we are. And I think doing things differently is required desperately, but it is essential if we are going to get to where we all want to be, is to remind ourselves that we are all human. We have to tap into what it is that makes us human in order to find those solutions. And I truly believe, like, what you're both up to is making ripples, if not waves, within the community, even if many may not necessarily be aware of it. Based on everything you've described, it sounds like you're doing things by stealth on one hand and doing things at a much higher level on another, and achieving some really great things. Thank you both for your insights. It's been invaluable.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to do the reveal of our stealth mode through your podcast. So,
Yeah. It's been awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Rob. I'm very, very excited to be participating in one of your sessions tomorrow. I'm sure I'll be sharing my experiences and my journey on social and elsewhere. And I'm sure if you'll have me, I would love to catch up again sometime in the future to hear more about your learnings over the last little while, and also some of those milestone achievements, which it sounds like you're making some really big inroads. So thank you both. It's been a pleasure.